Hi, welcome back. If you've been following our series on neurodiverse families, you'll know that we are almost wrapping up here, but I could not have done that without making sure that I spoke with these two wonderful parents. Lori and Sheila have generously offered some of their time and their lens on what it is like to parent kids who require them and us as parents to be their kids' external brains. Both Sheila and Lori work for FamilySmart, which is a lovely, amazing organization that works from the ground up. These are parents with lived experience who offer peer support for helping other parents who are experiencing some challenges around accessing care and treatment and supports for their kids who have mental health difficulties. And they come alongside because they care, because they know what it's like, and they've been there themselves. So Lori and Sheila are experts at being able to come alongside and sit with us who need to feel less alone in this. So welcome to the conversation today on being our kids' external brains. Maybe to start off, would you mind introducing yourselves in two ways? One, what your role is as a PIR, as a parent in resident with the FamilySmart program, and also just a bit about your family makeup and why this topic resonates with you. So maybe Sheila, you could start with that.
Okay, so hello, I'm Sheila Dyer. I am a parent in residence for the Okanagan, and I work in the community all the way from Penticton to Vernon as well as Kelowna. I provide parent peer support for families, parents and caregivers who have kids who are struggling with their mental health. And so I work one-on-one, we have video conferencing together, we talk on the phone, and because I have lived experience, I come from a place of understanding where people are coming from. And I really feel very honored to have that role. I'm also a mom. I've got two young men who both have struggled with their mental health throughout their young lives. And they are, as a colleague of ours says on a regular basis, they are my great teachers. They keep me grounded. They keep me going, and I have learned a great deal about myself and the world around me because of them. And so very happy to be here today talking about the external brain and all of the stuff that goes on in your head while you're trying to anticipate things that are going to come up. So thank you, Karen.
Okay, Lori, where are you coming from? And yeah, both personally and professionally.
My name is Lori Erickson. I'm a parent in resident that provides peer support at CASA in Edmonton, Alberta. And myself and the other PIR, both support families on site and a little bit in the community as well. Children that access services there go right from infant up to 18 years of age. And we help out with any of CASA's programs. So some of the residential programs on site will be there for admissions to help families through that, and all the other supports they have for children with mental health. I'm a mom of three, ages 10 to 21, and my older two have struggled with their mental health, and we're very much a neurodiverse family, and the mental health struggles have come with two different diagnoses in our family, and so there's a lot of juggling and adjusting and just trying to meet them where they're at and come together as a family. And my experience was really tough and as a parent. And so I became a parent in residence so that I can try and make that journey a little easier for other families trying to support their children.
Yeah, that is such a great description of what the whole essence of FamilySmart has been, right? It was built from the ground up to be able to bring the wisdom of the lived experience to make that journey a bit smoother, maybe, or more supported along the way, less alone for other parents. Yeah. Okay. I would like to know what either of you and both of you think when I say the words external brain. What does it mean for you? Like if you think about, I mean, both of you have come through many stages of child development with your kids because they're not little anymore. So we know that this changes what it means to external brain for our kids, changes developmentally as they grow up. But I bet you have like a treasure chest of memories of things that you have done as the external brain for any of your kids at any point in time. What do you think of when you think of the idea of being your kid's external brain?
Hyper organized, hyper vigilant, hyper in general.
Hyper in general. Yeah.
Oh, God, just
Mm.
people used to say when I had my kids were little and I had diaper bags full of things, and they would say, "Oh, you're so organized," and I'd be like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh," because I'd be anticipating absolutely everything that I might need, not only because it was a diaper bag, but because I didn't know if something was going to get broken or if thirst was going to be a big deal or if something needed to be there for distraction or what. It was like I think of it now like I'm overthinking. My kids will say, "Oh, Mom, you're overthinking," and
Okay.
it's because I've done it my whole life. Is this everywhere
Uh,
we went? It was preparation for what could happen, what's there, who's there, what's going to trigger my kids, who gets to stay, who gets to go. It was just
the constancy, right? I
it's
hear the constancy in
constant.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
becomes really ingrained the way you think. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
The hypervigilance piece is such a nervous system type experience, right? Right.
It's exhausting. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So the preparedness, the overthinking, maybe the extra thinking. Maybe I think
yeah,
extra, it's extra because you're packing for two, you're thinking for two, you're preparing for two, right? And that's if you're only doing this for one child. So
hmm,
adjust your numbers accordingly, right?
Yeah.
yes,
Preparing for five, preparing for six, yeah. And depending on the varying needs that you're having to consider not just every potential thing along the way that you're going to experience when you go out grocery shopping with your kids in tow, but you also have to think about each individual's needs along the way,
yeah,
right? Because one might have sensory struggles. It's going to be more around the I need immediate access to
yeah,
a sippy cup or
yeah,
a granola bar or whatever. And for other kids, that's not a thing at all. And it's going to be about how do I have something that I squish in my hand when we move from the van into the shopping cart
yeah.
because it's too hard to move from one thing to another. Yeah.
Well, and being able to
What makes, yeah,
abandon, I was going to say,
yeah.
abandon the grocery cart in the middle of a
Oh,
shop
can
Yeah.
you talk about that one?
because or going into, there was one store that I would go into. It was a lovely thrift store. I loved it. And my
Mm.
one son, as soon as he walked in, something triggered him and he was like a whirling dervish and he would almost rage and grab
Yeah.
things and he just, and I don't know what it was that triggered him in that space, but
Yeah.
after it happened the first time, of course, I found other ways to get him out to stay outside.
Yeah.
In the grocery store, same thing. If there's fatigue or whatever, for a lot of kids, they cry or or they'll act up. But if it's a full-on meltdown, you just have,
Yeah.
you just pick them up, stick them under your arm, and out you go. And there's nothing else you can do. And so
Yeah.
that's,
And that's when they're still small enough to do that.
I was going to say that's
yeah,
when you have
yeah,
the
My
strength to lift them.
Mine was
absolutely,
taller than me by grade 2, so we had to come up with other strategies really early.
yeah,
Me
Or
too. I had that
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Oh,
I just was not big enough to be able to
yeah.
do that. And I kind of slid into that avoidance of those situations. And it almost became part of my self-care was going to the grocery store alone at 9 or 10
Yeah.
o'clock at night because I could not manage that situation of taking them with me. And
Yeah.
so I would leave those tasks and got into avoiding those situations, which
Hmm.
is kind of scary too, but that's what we needed to do at that time. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
wasn't able to do
Yeah.
those everyday tasks a lot of the time. So that
Well,
was really
and that's
tough.
part of our external braining too, is always having to decide what's worth it.
Mhm.
So how much effort are we capable of putting in, willing to put in, for what outcome? Because as parents, we're always wanting our kids to grow and to learn and to be exposed to situations and to adjust and to adapt. But there's a limit. At any stage of development, you have to constantly, as a parent, assess what is worth it. So is it is that the moment you're going to teach your child to show up at a grocery store and still be okay? Maybe not, right? Maybe this is not their phase of development. It's not where they're capable or ready of doing that. And then who's benefiting, right? We're all just stressed out and sometimes unsafe,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
right?
you're thinking of
Yeah.
how you make that experience of going out with your kids. You're thinking for all your kids, your neurodiverse kids, and um, the rest of my family. But you're also, for me, I was always balancing, um, trying to explain to everybody around me what's happening.
Oh,
So I was like
yeah.
affected by, for the first little while. You get past that because you don't really have a
Yeah.
choice. At some point, it's like,
You
okay,
get a
those
bit
people.
immune, whatever.
Yeah, but you want to make the people that you're going to, if you're going to the park or you're going to try and
Yeah.
hang out with another family, you're wanting to protect their kids or explain away what's happening, and it's just trying to manage everybody's emotions and feelings and expectations, and that
Yeah.
hypervigilance. That's where
Yeah.
it became for me hard to do that, and so that's when that retreating came about for me,
It
because it
makes
became,
so much sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
became
But
too
it's
much.
also, I was thinking also, thinking about for my kids, I wanted them to have experiences with their friends. I wanted them to
Mm-hmm.
go to the party that was being held at the gymnastics area,
Yeah.
building or whatever. I wanted those things. And so I would do everything to get them there. And then when they got there, I had one that would go in full blast, and I'd be watching all the time because he was the runner,
Yeah.
right? He just
Yeah.
inside, he just needed to run, and so he would just run. So he would go into danger and run, and the other one would hold back and assess for a really long time before he would go in anywhere. So every time I go somewhere, I could never talk with other parents or chat because I was
Yeah.
watching for the one who was going to go into danger and try to nurture the one that wasn't ready to go in at all.
Yeah.
And so I'd finally we get to the end of it, and the one that was needing the nurturing was ready to go in, and it'd be over with. And so it
Yeah.
was like, it just
Uh-huh.
my heart would just break because it was just this feeling of I wanted them to have this wonderful thing,
Yeah.
but I couldn't do both, and I also never relaxed enough to enjoy myself chatting with the other moms who were just watching the kids play.
Yeah.
Um, it's a
Yeah.
Absolutely.
strange perspective to be, in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I found that same experience too, Sheila. I had those two very different ways of processing. And then you have your own way of processing things so that you're trying, and you kind of might identify with one kid more than the other. And it's like, I don't know how to help the one that's not as
Yeah.
similar
Yeah,
as me. And so, again, wanting those growth experiences and to expose them. So that means going on every school field trip, going on, and planning your life around giving them those experiences, but considering where we're at and where they're
Yeah.
emotionally at and developmentally at. So
yeah,
um, it's tough. And you see them do
Yeah.
well in those experiences sometimes. So you try to push a little more, and then you kind of end up too much sometimes.
yeah, yeah.
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 And I think that's one
Yeah.
of the things, we that is a kind of a grieving. My son went to his They'd had a dry grad thing and a great big party, and he had done the whole grad stuff all day long for high school, and then went to the big party, and it was an Outward Bound thing, and it was, ropes and ladders and barbecue, all of this stuff. And he was so exhausted, he called to have me come and get him because he couldn't cope with so much stimulus. So he lost the entire experience of that thing with all of his fellow graduates because he just couldn't, it had been enough energy expended throughout the day and anxiety, and to have yet another new thing to push him through, he just couldn't do it. So, it's, it made me so sad, because it was like, this is what life is. These are those memories that you're supposed to hold on to. But yeah, I guess for me, like you, Lori, you get used to it. You just go, okay, well, something else will happen. And I just have to believe that because, this one event isn't going to change who he is as a human being. So it's hard to get there, but you kind of have to,
And
we adjust our expectations, right? Like, I think that's what you're speaking to. We're adjusting what to expect, what to hope for, what to allow them to try, what they're going to need for soothing, what they're going to need for protection, right? When we need to step in. And being aware of the things that are too much, while holding our own awareness of what we know would have happened for him if he could have stayed, right? That's the tension that we're feeling and having to navigate inside.
Yeah. It's a constant adjustment, I think. And that external brain stuff is looking at all the possibilities and just having to be happy with whatever it turns out to be based on everything that's been prepared by me or anybody else in advance,
Yeah. I think we had a bit of overlap there, Lori, and you were going to say something. So before I bridge to the next thing, is there anything you wanted to add there?
Just knowing, being that external brain, because sometimes these kids who have these experiences where they try things and it ends up being quite scary or a little, traumatic for them, and they tend to pull back. It's that natural bit of pulling back. And so as a parent, lots of times I'll look at it, okay, how could we have done that differently so that you could go back and try it again? And sometimes I can get them in the space or the frame of mind to look at it and brainstorm with me on how it could look differently, and would you be open to trying it again? And sometimes there's just that shutdown. So it's hard to know when to kind of push a little bit to try those experiences again, and or wait for when they're ready. Because I have one that, nope, that was the experience. It's always going to look that way. It's never going to look any different, and we're not going back there. And the other one is like, oh yeah, and he doesn't always remember exactly how it went. So if we reframe it and talk about it, then he might give it another go. So for me, it's that constant push and pull of where is my responsibility? I want them to have autonomy over the choices they're making. Whether it's school, whether it's friends, whether it's, family things, but that heavy feeling of how far do I push them? And then the guilt if it doesn't go well, if you do push them, that there's that parent guilt thing when you're acting as their external brain, like that you need to make good choices, even though I don't know what I do. Exactly. I've never been a teenage boy. I'm just trying to figure this out.
That's awesome. Right. Yeah. So external braining, there's this component of assumed responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
So in other ways, I see the track of parenting often this, and I don't think it's different in its trajectory. We're still trying to kind of wean our kids off of us, right? In any developmental capacity. But we have to stick with this job so much longer with our neurodiverse kids. And so we're doing this for them at a time where their peers might not require it. And so we have to assume this responsibility, which then comes with any responsibility, comes this burden of feeling like, did I make the right choice or the wrong choice? right? Did I do enough? Did I do too much? Did I plan well? Did I miss something? Because that's the thing that we expect our kids to take on for themselves. The critical thinking and okay, did I think ahead? And should I have brought my coat because I didn't realize it was raining? And should I have, and what will I do to get out of this situation? Now I'm stuck somewhere and my friends left me. How do I get home? How do I make a phone call and who do I call? And all of this stuff that we start to see a capacity grow for in some kids might not be happening for ours. And so we're on this journey more intensely and longer. And then having these debates in ourselves about, like, did I do the right thing? And then, we'll go for coffee with a parent who doesn't have this lived experience, and they'll say, oh, my kid just figured it out this morning and I don't know where they are, but that's fine, they'll figure it out. Like, that just doesn't resonate with me. I'm thinking, no, that's my job to find out, right, how they're going to get home. Yeah.
I don't know about you, Lori, but I one of my kids, his first answer to everything was no. And so you'd say, oh, we're going to do this. And he'd say, no, I'm not doing it, not happening. And so we had to prolong. So if we wanted to do something in sometimes 3 months' time, if it was going to be a big deal, we would have to tell him in 3 months' time, and he would have to take 3 months to answer ongoing, constant questions about whatever that event was, so that before we actually went, he had thought about every single aspect of what was going to happen. How we're going to be there, what are we going to take, how are we going to take there, how many people will be in the car, who's going to be in the car, are we going to take a train, what's the train like, or do we have to get tickets, when do we have to get tickets, what if we don't make the train, what if we, and it was exhausting. And
yeah, I can feel
it just, even just thinking about it raises my blood pressure a little bit. But it was a bit of a strange relief as well when we discovered that's what we had to do, because we had less meltdowns and a little bit less disappointment going places. So we, your friends so-and-so, they're having a barbecue, their family's having a barbecue next weekend, not today, not tomorrow, next weekend. And then we could have time to deal with all the questions that went along with it. And I know there were times when those kind of questions, because of anxiety, because of needs, I would just shut down. And I had someone say to me once, aren't you going to answer your son? And I didn't even realize he had asked the same question over and over and over and over again. And I'd answered so many times that I stopped. I stopped even hearing him. I just stopped responding. And it might have been about, can I have an ice cream sundae or something? Can I have an ice cream sundae? No, we're not going to. Can I have an And, it took someone else to snap me out of it, because I was just done. Yeah. So it's patience, that external brain, but it's also, it can get, as a parent, I think, very overwhelming, where you just kind of, there's a part of you that just turns, it shuts down, which is not a good feeling as a parent. I don't want to be that parent, but I have been.
I'm glad you raised that, because I wanted to hear from both of you a little bit about the toll that it takes, or the impact it has. Because so many parents, I think, feel like they should be a superhero, somehow rise above every difficult circumstance, have like crazy stamina and ridiculous amounts of patience. And because of what's in front of us, we know what's needed. We assume then, if that's what's in our corner, in our home, we then should just have been born with this gigantic capacity somehow. And so the discrepancy, I think, sometimes is that we have to adjust our expectations and recognize, sure, we're always trying to rise to the occasion for our kids and for ourselves, but you have your own limits. There's physiologically, there's a limit to what you can do for people, what you can hold space for, what you can have patience for, what you can think ahead for. Your brain is it's probably stretched bigger over the course of experience, but it didn't come out of the womb for you any bigger than anybody else, right? And so just hearing you share that makes me wonder, like, what are the realistic things that start happening to us physically and emotionally when you have walked the external brain tightrope for years? What has that been like? What have you noticed in terms of its impact on you?
Well, I can agree with Sheila that it's exhausting. That would be
Yeah.
the number one thing that comes to my head. Um,
Mm.
that hypervigilance for me means no sleep or very
Yeah.
little sleep. I have a partner that's a shift worker, so lots of times I'm the only one home at night, and
Mm.
it's it's that isolation, because sometimes the thinking and the situations we find ourselves in as parents, um, we don't share them because
No.
they're so big and they're so hard, and they're not situations you would ever imagine yourself being in. And so opening up and sharing that with other people means the possibility of being judged,
Yeah.
and um, or them having to take care of their feelings as they try to fix it for you. That's a
Yes.
huge one for me. It's
Ah,
like, yes, I would love to talk to someone about this, but if I have to spend it's not going to be a comfort to me if I have to go into detail about how
yeah.
we do the things we do, and
Mm.
or be offered suggestions when we've tried
Yep.
everything and access
Yes.
supports and done the learning and know what kind of works for my kid and what doesn't work. Um, and so for me, coming to FamilySmart and finding other people that have gone through that journey, that was huge for me, because that was the first time I ever found families like mine, and
Mm.
that understood, that just kind of got, without me sharing all the details and everything we were going through, just that right now is a rough patch and I'm really tired
Yeah.
today. And
Yeah.
I don't know where to go or what to do about it.
Mm.
It's I so get it, Lori. I can't tell you how many times I sat in the principal's office at our school crying because the process of just getting my son into school
Oh,
was
Yeah.
so hard. Um, and then once he got there, he was actually not so bad, you know. But the feeling I had the first time I had someone who worked with the external brain and had a neurodiverse child. Um, I laugh about it now, and she looked at my messy house and all the projects that were going on all over the place, and she just started to laugh, and she said, "Oh, thank God someone has a house that looks like mine." And I just felt it was the most wonderful thing, because
ah,
I have had other people come in that, you know, when things were really, really bad, and say, "Oh my God, why
what a
did you let your
mess.
children do that? What a mess why
Yeah.
did you let them do that?" And I'd be like,
Yes.
"Oh God, I had to, because that's the only opportunity I had for a little bit of quiet, and I was able to breathe." Or, "No, I didn't clean it up because what would happen if I did would take
Yep.
3 days for us to get through. So I left things, you know." But um, it's really hard to describe that to somebody, you know, that
Yeah.
sense of, no, I'm happy with it being like that because I know what will happen if I don't leave it
Yeah.
where it is, you know.
Or that's the
Yes.
one thing that had to give, right? Like having a
Yeah.
clean house with it on this list of demands that's in my family. That's
Yeah.
the thing that I
The
was willing to
last.
put aside to
Mhm.
be able to get through today. Yeah. And that,
Mm.
hearing you talk about school, Sheila, for me, that hypervigilance was when that school phone number showed up on my phone, my
Yeah.
heart would race,
Yes. Oh
and
man.
I would be almost crying before I picked up the phone, because it, for
Oh.
us, it was throughout our elementary experience with both boys, and I was having phone calls a couple times a week, and it wasn't just, what do we do about this? It's, you need to come get your child. They
Mhm.
cannot be here with us. And so that
Yeah.
was that constant hyper hypervigilance and it's 30 below and I'm grabbing my baby in her carrier and I'm loading up the vehicle. And sometimes my kid was at the school and sometimes they were in that fight or flight running away from school and they didn't know where my child was. And so we did years and years of that. And after all those years, it took some time once we found programs that did meet their needs and things were going better. And for me, I'd say it took at least a couple years. And I still, when the school phones, it still goes, and then it's like, oh no, it might just be they forgot their lunch. Like it's not necessarily those things, but I make sure to tell those teachers or anytime the school phones with something good, like I let them know how much that means to me. It's like, it is so good to get a good phone call from somewhere. And it means the world because those are not the phone calls you're used to getting. And so, that was before text. Once we got a little ways down the road, I had EAs that would text me. So that was, then I was typing, So we've come through a whole way of communication and we're still going. We're still here.
Oh, my goodness. Oh man, your memories just bring up so many things for me. I remember so many of those things, the flight risk and the phone calls and oh boy. Yeah. And the state of our home and I feel very lucky that I had some close friends who did not judge me for the state of our disaster that, because they understood the tornado that was coming through it. But I struggled. I struggled with my needs versus my kids' needs. I needed organization to feel a sense of calm, and I could never get it in my own home. Right. And so, because it's their own home as well, it just overrode the chaos needed to happen. And to this day, we have maybe a different version of this, but we set up a specific table in our living room that is her craft table. And within 10 minutes, there's 15 projects going on simultaneously. And there's beads on the floor, and there's glitter everywhere, and there's slime being created, and there's everything I hate is happening on that table. And then, but I say, but it's on that table, so I can live with that table. But because she doesn't have the functioning to organize it and to clean up after herself and to do those things, it gets abandoned and she moves to the next clean available space. Right. So it's overspill. So now it's the coffee table and the kitchen counter and the dining room table. And if I am not the external brain to say, okay, we're booking a time, we have to front load because I can't spring that on her. So what's a good time for you? And when are we going to, right? And then we clean up the space and we go, and within 10 minutes, it is full again. And we're back at the coffee table and we've moved and migrated to the bedroom. And it's not her bedroom, it's my bedroom. And it's right. And so that familiar flooding of there's no boundary to these things. We have to be the boundary all the time, creating the where's the limit, where's the no, where's the it's too much, where's the okay, it's time for. Our kids don't have those internal cues to say, okay, this is enough or this is too much. Yeah. And the reining in. And yeah. And we feel those things. They impact us.
Yeah. And sometimes no matter how much you front load, it doesn't make any difference. Or,
Or you try to front load kids differently and you forget which kid. It's like, oh yeah, that's not the way you like it done. It's the other kid. And it's like, it's like, right? Or you're trying to explain to school and you're trying to sort which teacher to tell about which thing. And it's for those times where you're not there to be their brain and you have to communicate. They're not always able to communicate what they need. So you're trying to communicate to someone else how they can be that external brain for your child.
That's right.
Yep. And it's like, oh man. So not only do I have to know how to do it, I have to be able to explain how to do it to someone else and then let go and let it happen. For me, that was the hard part, was letting go and letting someone else do that for you. because you know how hard it is, and you know the you know how big a toll it can take when their needs aren't met.
The intensity of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I don't know about you, Lori, but I was also, I would feel some shame having to describe the behavior and the way that I handle things, or words that I used or whatever, and that it would just feel like, this is what I do, this is what I try, this is, what's going on. But it's hard when you're the parent who doesn't, you don't want to be the one that uses up all the extra time at the school, you know,
That's right.
to be doing all that stuff. And some educators are right in there and they totally understand, and others, it's harder to find the language sometimes to use the
Yeah.
external brain to help them understand how they need to use an external brain as well. That just by saying or doing specific things doesn't mean that that's going to be the way to solve something.
well, I
Yeah.
think it's asking people to really look at your child, not their
Mhm.
diagnosis, because
Good.
there's been
Yes.
so many situations where I've been in, oh yeah, this person in my life has autism or has ADHD. I know all about that because my niece
Yeah.
has it. And I'm like, does your niece live with you? Are
Hmm.
you their
Hmm.
caretaker? I'm really glad that you have some awareness around this, but this is my child and this is what it looks like for us. And I
Good.
don't say that to discredit their lived experience. It's just hear me when I tell you this
Yeah.
is what we're doing and this is what works for us. Do you have some input that we can work together and find something that's going to work for all three of us? Right?
Yeah.
So that's that's one tricky thing that I found is um, very open and caring, and people that want to help, they just don't always have the tools, and and sometimes they do just have to experience being with with your child, and then they come back and go, okay, now I understand what you meant by that, and and then we move forward from there. And there's a lot of preloading you can do in school and with other caregivers, but until they experience your child and they have a connection with them, it's out of my hands, it's out of anybody's hand, right? Like they have to
Mm.
find some way to connect, and they'll find their
Relationship.
own way to connect. It's not going to be the same way as
That's right.
me. And
Right.
even with your
And that,
partner.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's our personal attunement, right? And without the
Yeah.
relationship, we can't access the data that we need from connecting with that child. Doesn't matter what child that is, right? And so whether we're living with them, whatever the spaces that you're trying to be with them in, it's going to look different, feel different. And there's no textbook that tells you. There's no strategy guide that's pre-scheduled and pre-created that you just go into your first IEP meeting and you hand a nice little table, right? Of a chart of here are the strategies. I mean, you can create what works for you by communicating and plugging those things in, but you cannot come with templates,
No.
right? They don't
Yeah.
work. And without the relationship, we don't gain access to what's going to work and what's not going to work. So it's, I think we've mentioned this before in conversations of it feels very whack-a-mole because it's all trial error. We see
Yeah.
a problem pop up and we hit it on the head with something and we go, "Oh, did that work? Nope, didn't work. Okay, came up somewhere else. Okay, we're going to."
Yeah.
And that doesn't, we can't just translate that. I can't just pass that along in a backpack with my kid when I drop them off at school and then say, make sure you pass that to your teacher so they can do it. They have to learn, right? And learn to, yeah, to find that intuitive, okay, when I did this with them, this worked. When I said it this way, it had an impact. When I did it this way, it triggered them. When I, because their voice is not the same as my voice. I can't bring my voice in a voice recording to the classroom, right? And how we, yeah, and I think about all the nuanced things like, oh my goodness, all the tiny, tiny things I've
Yeah.
adjusted in my parenting, the look I give, the way I stand, how I approach, how long I approach, what things I approach about, how many things in a row I can say. Just how do you learn that in a 9-month window of teaching or before they get passed to the next person? And so how that looks for each person who encounters and supports our child is different.
Yeah, yeah. And then I had the next phase, which was the kids started to do really well in school, but the second they stepped into the car, they would be screaming and yelling and blaming,
Yes.
and all of the stuff that they'd held onto all day would be exploded like it was like a bomb going off in the car. And I'd be driving home and I had no idea where well, I was like, what happened? This must have been horrible. And so I'd contact the school and they would say, oh, no, they had a great day. We had this, all the positive things would come out. And I'd be like, what? And it's because they were holding on to so much of it. And I guess I was a safe person to explode to.
Yep.
And they could say and be angry at me for everything in the world that was going on. And it took me quite a long time to not take it personally. It was devastating the first few times it happened because I just didn't know what to do. So again, front loading on my way to school. Okay, what can we do that's going to be different? How can I break the pattern? What can I do? So I'd stop the car and I'd say, let's go for a walk or go for ice cream. Or, hey, before we go anywhere, I found this. It was just anything just to try to filter out whatever they'd been holding so that I didn't get it full on. It was, so it's like we do all the stuff to prep for school and then things start to get a little bit better and it just turned right around and went back. But I think that's the other part of the front loading is that you're not only front loading and thinking about everything that could possibly happen, you're having to switch gears so fast to pull another tool out of your toolbox because the same thing doesn't work 2 times in a row or 2 days in a row.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. When you described that, Sheila, that the whole journey post school and the shame that like how do I carry all that? How do I pivot? When you started describing like, okay, we'll go for ice cream, we'll go for a walk. Oh, here come the alarm bells for me because this is all the things that I hear other parents would look at that with the stink eye of like, you're rewarding that. You're rewarding right? And I said it to myself. I'm like, here I go again. I'm rewarding the, right? Because it was just survival. But actually it turned into recognizing we are need meeting all the time. This is not about rewarding bad behavior. This is about meeting a need to function better and get beyond or through something that's hard. That I'm hand holding in this process to get through it, not to say, good job freaking out on the side of the road. Good job biting somebody. Good job. Like, that's not what it's about. But me doing anything punitive or corrective in that moment is not just useless, it's damaging. And then, but to other parents, I'm hearing this like, and it's not even verbal. It's just this kind of dazed look like, what are you doing? Right. And I know what's going through their heads. Right. And this is such a common experience that these micro moments that we witness and we're so aware of when we pick our kids up from school, it's in front of a giant audience.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
I sat at a restaurant with a friend and her daughter, and immediately as soon as we get in the restaurant, I would pull out my kit bag. But, and I would have, X and O's. I would have a new toy. Game of cards. We played cards everywhere we went, because as the kids got older, that's something they really were good at. And so my girlfriend, who I love dearly, turned to me and went, "We don't play games at the table." And all I could say was, we do, and we kind of have to. So I'm just going to do this, and it's okay. Your daughter doesn't have to join, which broke my heart because she wanted to. But it was, we can't have a rule like this because, you have to
stay at the restaurant.
You have to eat your vegetables before you have dessert. I don't know about you, but I've often said, okay, today we'll just do it backwards. Everybody gets to have their their pie or their applesauce before they eat the rest of their meal,
Yeah.
because that stopped the process of the same rules just don't apply. And there's always something in the back of your head telling you that this is not the way it's supposed to be. And my mom's voice would come in, and I'd have to fight those to go, yeah, but what's in front of me is different. And I have to throw all those other ideas out the window and just see what I can do right now for this.
And I found that too, Sheila. That was that shame, and why do we always have to be the family going for dinner at 4 o'clock, like the early bird special, because that's when it's not busy. And what kind of became our mantra is, and I found myself repeating it to my youngest, was that's what it looks like for our family. It might look different for other people's families. Until I believed it myself, like that little shame was there, and that little bit of resentment, and that, like, why does this have to be so hard, was still there. But as I found with my youngest, she's quite a bit younger than her brothers. I was explaining things of, well, this is what school looks like for your brother, and this is what it looks like for this buddy in your class. And I started to apply that to our family and my way of thinking of, well, this is what it looks like for us. It might look different for you. And just as a way to kind of make myself believe that empathy piece, because it still sneaks up. I mean, it's probably always will kind of sneak up on me at the strangest times, things that you thought you had let go of. But that was helpful to me. It was just, this is what we need to do to make life good for our family. This is what it looks like.
And isn't that what adjustment is, right? When we grieve, and I want to talk a bit about the grief piece, but when we grieve, it's a path it's a gateway to adjusting. We don't adjust without accepting and grieving the reality. And grief, not because our kids are broken, it's because the situation feels hard and it's unexpected. So if it isn't aligned with what we thought was going to be, we're grieving it. It's not what we hoped it would be, we're grieving it. And that gives way. I think people resist grief, but grief passes us through to adjustment, where we go, you know what, this is different, not broken. I have to pivot to make this work, and that's not bad, that's good. Right? If I keep resisting, it will always feel broken. If I realize that it just has to look different to support them well, the brokenness isn't the thing anymore. Right? It's hard, but it's not about us trying to fix something as much as how do we work with it? How do we work with it? Yeah. The grief piece. What have you grieved? What has grief looked like for you, or what are the things you thought might be and didn't happen that way as parents? I think we have kids, and we all have these, wherever they come from, some wildly fantastical dreams about what we imagine, and we all have to pivot. It's never what we think, but I wonder what that journey has been like for you.
Well, I gave up a really high-profile job at the University of British Columbia because I was exhausted with two small children who had things going on. And the reality of our lives, I mean, thank goodness my husband in some ways is self-employed because he was able to be flexible with his schedule. But I think one of the things that happens, and I don't know what the stats are, but I'm pretty much guaranteed it's true, is that when you've got kids who are struggling, you cannot work as much, you can't make as much money. Right. You often don't have a lot of the same things that other people are able to have. So we didn't have a lot of fancy holidays. We didn't do, because somebody always had to be at the end of the phone. Someone needed to be available for those field trips. Someone needed to be able to put in the extra time with kids in the evening who are not able at the time to do the homework they've been given. So some of it for us, I know, was this grief of not being able to feel like we're really hugely moving forward in life, because so much of it is what's happening right now. So I think that was kind of a big one.
Yeah. I felt that too. I was home for many years. Um, my husband was working all the time. He had to work 3 jobs for us to be able to have me home full time. And um, things you had planned, just pieces of yourself, things that I did for myself, hobbies, those kind of have to get put aside. And maybe the people that did those things with you, they kind of move on with their life and their kids. And you kind of
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're just living day to day. And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
it's been 10 years of living day to day. And you go,
Well
well,
said.
what happened? Where did that time go? And so you've kind of gotten through that grieving, and now we're going to, okay, what's our life going to look like? And you go into um, movement for them, but we kind of have to stay stuck. And that's the
Yeah.
hardest piece for me, was I felt stuck for so long.
Yeah.
I felt like I was helping them move forward, and they were doing great, and I was doing great, better as a mom and supporting them, and I was learning, but it was all about them.
Them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so those little
Mm-hmm.
pieces of yourself, and those, some of those friendships and some of those people in your life that move forward without you, and you're grieving that as well.
Well, and yeah, and Laura, you moved, right? You made an actual
Yes.
physical move. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that a bit?
We we moved to a different community when I was pregnant with my second, and so my first, his needs were substantial, and um, we weren't getting what we needed from our medical community where we lived,
Mm-hmm.
and weren't able to access support. And so my husband actually had a career change, and we moved, and we only moved an hour away, but my entire family and my hometown were in that little town. And so everything was new. Um, and there wasn't a lot of time to integrate into that new community, because all the people I were meeting were in regards to my son's care. And then I had this brand new little
Mm-hmm.
baby. And so um, we had a few friends that were already established here that we knew that we were moving towards. So I thought, oh, I'm going to move to this awesome support system. And like I said, they were in different places with their families and what we all had young kids, and
Yeah.
they moved forward, and we couldn't really. And my husband's career demanded him being on call
Mm-hmm.
and busy, so I was home alone a lot with
Oh
those
man.
2 little ones. um, and a lot of our stuff was physical at that point, before we knew what our diagnosis was. So there was a lot of thinking it was something that was medical, that was going to be fixed, and we just had to get through this rough little patch. um, but then finding out once they went to school that it was much different
Mm.
than what we thought. And that community we moved away from, I was all of a sudden wanting, that family support, and those people
Yeah.
that weren't able to be there in the way that I needed on a daily basis, because they had their own families and jobs
Yeah.
and things. Um,
Mm.
so yes, a lot of our community came from just the needs of our kids, and not necessarily the needs of myself, or having a job, or creating things that typically introduce you to a new community.
Mm.
Yeah,
Massive adjustment.
absolutely.
And I get it, Lori, because that's what we did when
Yeah.
we went from Canada to Wales, and 9 years later, we moved back to Canada because the kids, we couldn't get what they needed. They were getting some supports, little bits and pieces, but we couldn't get what they needed. And eventually, for a number of reasons, but the biggest one was our kids, and they were not thriving. And so we moved back to Canada so that we could have a better support system for their needs because of their diagnoses. But every time you do something like that, it takes a few years to kind of find your ground. And for me, it was starting from scratch with all of the support systems, hours and hours of on the phone,
Oh yeah.
blood, sweat, and tears, trying to find out who do I talk to about this, and how do I do it, and how much money is it going to cost, and how
Mm-hmm.
many months
Mm-hmm.
will it take, and okay, we have to have a reassessment done. Oh, how do I do that in Canada? And
Yeah.
the differences with resources. It was Yeah. But
Huge.
you know, at the time, you just do it because you
Mm-hmm.
got no choice. You know, you just do it, and
That is one thing, Sheila. Like, you have no choice, and we get so many well-meaning people in our lives that want to help and care about us, and they just say, "I don't know how you do it," and I'm thinking, do
Like,
I have
neither
a
do I.
choice? I don't either. Like,
It's
there
just
aren't a lot
happening.
of
I wake
choices
up
here.
and
We
I do
have
it.
to. And you don't. And so,
Yeah.
they're trying to say these supportive, loving things, and it's like, oh, you don't know how much it took just to get us to school, or you don't know how much it took for us to get to the
That's right.
park today, and they will never know, right?
Yeah.
They will never know. It has to just be enough that we know that we got
We
them
showed
there.
up. Yes,
We showed
that's
up
right.
as best we could, and this is what it looks like today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that little bit of
I,
self compassion, right?
well, and nothing on this life journey, it doesn't matter what you're talking about, nothing is all bad or all hard or all impossible, and
yeah,
nothing is all easy, smooth, and squeaky clean. So,
yep.
not to create any emotional whiplash here, but we've been talking about the stuff we've been grieving and the hard parts. I'm curious about what has surprised you. Your kids are older now. They've grown in some capacity. You've watched things that I'm sure at some points of your journey you wondered, maybe quietly or maybe out loud, like, is this ever going to become okay? Will we ever get, like, do we, I've had conversations with other parents who have said, I'm terrified my kid's going to end up in jail. Like, I can't see another outcome here. Like, they want every thrill. How are they not going to use drugs? They want every, like, and they're 9 when they're saying this, or they're 4 when they're saying this. And I've had those thoughts. I've been like, I just don't see a way that this is ever gonna. And now I see my 10-year-old or my 13-year-old doing things that I go, okay, I really did not see that being a thing. And look at them now, right? And what surprised you on the journey about your kids? What have you been pleasantly surprised with, or feel hopeful for, that maybe you didn't know you could feel hope about before?
You want to go, Lori?
Don't
Yeah.
know. That makes me emotional. um,
Ah,
in a good way. I have
yeah.
2 high school graduates. For a long time, I didn't know if that was going to happen,
Yes.
um, or if that was
Mm,
not on anyone else's timetable, but if it was going to happen.
yeah.
Um, and I do have a funny story about my oldest son, who still requires a lot of kind of day to day support. But if you get that kid into a routine, he is golden. Like, he gets up, he gets stuff ready for what he's going to. And once, when he was in routine, it was actually the last couple of years of high school were pretty good. He liked going where he was going. He knew he had things to learn and things to do. But then we kind of didn't know what came after high school. And we had to take a year that was just kind of, you know, wondering what that looked like for him. He had a lot of friends and people that moved on and went to post secondary. He was kind of in that category where not quite ready for that, not sure if that's something that we're capable of without the supports that had previously been in place. And so someone asked him at his high school graduation, well, what are you going to do? And he goes, well, I think I'm just going to go work. I'm going to go work at the Wine and Beyond store, because someone had said to him maybe they could get him an interview there. And and so this person reached out and was able to get him an interview. And we prepped with all the interview questions, and it was happening very fast within a week of this person mentioning it, and we're like, oh, this is where we're at. So we went ahead and did this, prepped him, and the person phoned him directly and said, we'd like you to come in for an interview. And he answered the phone. He said, okay. And then he said, can I bring my mom to the interview person? And she was lovely and gracious. If you'd like to, you can have your parent
Beautiful.
come with you. And we got off the phone, and I reached out to another support person of his that had done some job prep stuff with him, and we got on the phone and was able to let this other person say, Matheson, do you think other 19-year-olds take their moms on a job interview? And he said, well, I don't really think so. And she says, no, they don't. And he goes, okay, then that's not what's done. And let's go in. And he marched in there and he got the job.
Oh,
And he's been working there for 2 years. And he's doing things I never imagined. He's
yeah.
helping customers. He's interacting with customers. He has buddies there. He carries on conversations, and they planned a birthday little celebration for him when it was his day to work, and
Amazing.
amazing. And this was all him. I have never had to lean into a supervisor about changing shifts, or he is managing it on his own, and it's just 1 or 2 days a week, but it's
Yeah.
completely his. And we still have all the things happening at home, like, did you pack a lunch for work? Like, have you washed your clothes for work? Like, there's all this background stuff, but the actual work and that job and that routine, and it's every certain day of the week,
It out.
he shows up and he's got it and he is proud of it, and he gets there on his bicycle, and it's all him. And I've been able to step back. I'm more amazed at myself. It's like I've been able to step back and not be a part of it. And that just gives me hope for what's to come. So, yeah.
Well, can't it also feel, if you are needed in that way as the external brain for so long, yes, it's habit, but it's also hard to tell when it's time to pull back.
Yeah.
When it's going to be effective to pull back, and where. So just because he can do it there at the store doesn't mean he's ready at home. And I think about the amount of supports that allow for that to flourish, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we were to remove those things, right? And so even when you say, I'm surprised, actually, I'm like proud of myself for being able to pull, I think we are probably more often than not ready to do that, but we have this gut instinct of, it's not time. They aren't ready for us to pull back. And so it looks maybe sometimes like enabling or doing too much, but I think we have a pretty good instinct for when we can test the waters, because that's all we ever do. We're constantly testing waters of like, is that okay? Did that work? I'm watching for all the cues and the signals of, is that a success or not? That we will do that for the successful things too, for the things they're ready for the time to let go, because man, the relief is very welcome, right? When it works and we can go, they don't need me for that. That's not something we're avoiding. We don't love being the external brain all the time. And so this, when it can happen, it's just such a whole beautiful experience on both ends for our kids to feel like, this is mine. This is mine. I can do this independently. And for us to, as parents, be able to say, it's theirs. They can do this independent. That feels so good on our end too, right?
Yeah. When it can flourish, when it is all about them and their personality and the interactions that they're having, that's when it really blows me away. Not that he did it independently, because there are those little pieces, but when their needs are met, how good it can be. Like when their needs are met, how much they can do. And
So
it's okay to ask for those accommodations, right? And they can feel okay asking for those accommodations, and be proud that they're able to communicate what they need. Because I'm not good at it. I mean,
so great.
I need work in that department.
Saying what we need. Yeah, that's not easy.
It's not easy for anyone.
No.
Do you know, it's so interesting. My youngest son is the one that was my runner as a kid, right? He would just go into anything without thinking. But he was also the same kid that we had to tell weeks or months or days in advance of something happening, and then he could work it out. Well, my eldest got a job at Dairy Queen, but couldn't be on the front because he has too many allergies to the things that are out there. So he was in the kitchen doing all the fry-up stuff. And then my youngest took on being at the counter, and he socially struggles, right? But because he has become a planner, right? It's like that's what needs, and all of this anxiety that led up to it is now one of his greatest gifts. And he looks at the outcome of what needs to happen and he works backwards from it. And he literally can plan how many hours it's going to take to do certain things.
Rehearsed.
It's incredible. And
Wow.
he used to say, like, okay, so I've decided this week I'm going to master making peanut butter parfaits or whatever, and I'm going to do it in record time. And he would do it in record time, and he would go and did it, or I'm going to master how to work such and such a machine, and he would do it. And they asked him to be a manager, and he said yes, because he said, I'm going to have to deal with things if I'm going to be an engineer. So if I can do this, then it's just practice for later. But he would verbalize exactly what he was doing and preparing.
So good.
And it was the most incredible thing. The other thing, and I don't know, Lori, I think with having kids who are neurodiverse, we have such different relationships with our kids. Mm-hmm. And the biggest one for me is that I have learned such a lot. I've always been someone who goes in to solve a problem, and because of my kids, I've had to pull back. Mm-hmm. And I've learned how to take a beat, take a break, make sense of what's happening first before I open my mouth or whatever. But what's happened is because of that, they have now started to, they're, hopefully they have by now, they trust me enough to come to me because I'm not jumping in to solve. And because I backed off, sometimes I just want to cry. I'm so happy. My heart just wants to explode with happiness because out of the blue, I'll have arms around me, or someone will, or just so a kiss on the cheek, or I love you, Mom, or it, and
the bond.
I don't know. I don't know if that happens everywhere, but because I think of all of our struggles together, I think maybe I found a place of safety, my husband and I, so that they could feel like they could be who they needed to be and that they could trust, I don't know, trust us enough. We have a very close family right now, and COVID's helped, but it, instead of breaking us, it brought us together. And I don't know, they're 21 and 23 now. They're still at home. They still need us. We still have long talks about anxiety, and we troubleshoot and work through problems. And when they go, I will miss them more than I can even begin to say. But I also feel like when they are ready to go, I'll be ready to let them go.
You'll be excited for them.
I'll be excited for them. Yeah. So anyway, my lovely fly has decided to come back.
Yes, the fly in your office wants desperately to have a say here.
It was good for a while.
He was. He kind of behaved
anyway. That's the thing, is that we have neurodiverse kids, but they give us such gifts. Such gifts. And we could never ever know that when we're going through the storm and when we're functioning at an incredible place and our brains are exploding with all the ideas of things we're supposed to cope with.
One of the most powerful things ever said to me in the midst of the storm was an older friend of mine who was a colleague who could relate completely, and said that her then 18, 19, and 20-year-old kids were the picture of my other kids. She's like, oh yeah, we had to call the police because so-and-so was missing. And oh yeah, we went for 4 hours wondering if our daughter had drowned in the lake. And oh yeah, we had this, for her to say that and then say, I can anchor you to your future. It is possible that that same kid will get a job, that same kid will respond to you and hug you and say thank you. And that same kid will manage their emotion, and that same kid will have a long-term relationship. And that's, I'm like, well, I can't argue with your proof that this is possible, because she really could remember the dirt of it, remember all the mud and the harshness and the terrifying experiences, and tell me this is the same kid that gets up early, does it on her own, shows up for work, does equine therapy with kids, does the I'm like, for real. Okay. I hung on to that tighter than any expert advice, any book I had read, because it was the hope and the need to believe that my vision was only 2 inches from my face. And I couldn't see past that. And that was okay, but I needed somebody else to see it for me. It was so huge. And I think about the role that you play as parent in residence for families. That is the lifeline, the thing that tethers them to you'll get there. You will get there. It's okay that you don't see it. It's okay that you're in the mess. This holds so much hope, and it's okay that you don't know where that is yet. I can hold that for you, with you, beside you, while you're in the thickness of it. So I want to say thank you for the work that you do, the wisdom you bring, the life you give and breathe into this position, because it is immensely powerful and so uniquely important. So thank you, not just for today's conversation, but for the day-to-day work that you do and how you are willing to share your stories and sit in this again with parents, because you could have said, I've done my time. I'm tempted to say that some days, like, I've been there, done that. Now that I'm kind of through the thickness of the forest, I kind of just want to sit at the beach. I don't really want. So the fact that you, with great knowledge of self-care and some careful boundaries for your own health, that you still wade in the depth of the waters with parents who so need another parent. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thanks for saying it.
It feels like a gift to me a lot of those days, because I blocked out a lot of what we went through. And then I'll have a family lean in and I'll go, oh, wow, yeah, we got through that. And it gives me hope that there's a place to go. Because I've come through a lot of what families are leaning into me
Are
about.
still in.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then it's like, oh, wow, yeah, that happened to us too. And it reminds
I know you
me.
You swear you'll never forget, right?
Yeah.
The most jarring of experiences that are so traumatizing. We're like, well, I don't have to write this one down. It will be forever etched in my brain. And lo and behold, 5 years later, we're like, oh, right, I did that. I didn't sleep for 4 years. That was a thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's
incredible.
Back. Yeah, it does. Thank you for putting it to good use, for sitting in it with people. Yeah. And it was so lovely to have this conversation. Thank you for everything you've shared today.
Thank you, Karen, for letting us talk about it.
Yeah, having this conversation.
I know it's going to benefit a lot of parents. Can't wait to put it up there. All right. We'll talk again soon.